but so I went the adventure trip with Deborah. One of the adventure trips with Deb was around about Easter, and she said, Dad, let's go on an adventure trip somewhere. And then I'd seen about this place called Belize, and there was some lodge in Belize that I'd read about somehow, and I didn't even know where Belize was, but I suggested to her, maybe we should go to Belize, and she was with a friend of hers during this conversation, and the friend said, yeah, Belize is a great place, you've got to go. So I tried to get into this lodge, and they said it was now totally full. It was just before Easter, and there's no way we could get in. So I tried a few other places, and they were all full. And I said, Deborah, I'm sorry, I can't get into Belize. And Deborah is a very persistent young lady. No, Dad, we've got to get to Belize. We've got to get to Belize. We've got to get to Belize. So I made a few phone calls, and eventually I made a call to some woman, and she said, yeah, I can get you in. And we had a nice conversation together. And then I said to her, where are you, by the way? She said, I live in northern Minnesota. I said, you've got to be kidding. I'm in Minneapolis, and here I'm talking to you about getting a booking in Belize, and you're the only person who can get me in, and you're in Minnesota. So she got us in, and we went to two places. We flew into Belize, Deb and I, and then we went, the first place was called Caves Branch Lodge, which was inland. And again, we just had a fantastic time, Deb and I. We went on various hikes, and then we had one really great experience. We went on this hike through the jungle, and then we went rappelling again. Now, I'd been it, so I wasn't as scared as the first time. We rappelled down into what had been a cave that had collapsed, or part of the roof had collapsed. So we rappelled right down to the bottom. Then we hiked into this cave, and then they'd arranged that we slept and spent the night in this cave, and there were human remains in the cave, there were pottery in the cave, and of course, what night do I choose to have to get a bit of an upset stomach? But that night, and so I had a bit of diarrhea, and the little toilet place was outside the cave, so I had to get up a couple of times during the night with my flashlight and find my way out of the slippery cave to go to the toilet. But that was just fantastic. And then we went on rubber tubes, inner tubes, inside the cave with little flashlights, and then without the flashlights going down the Cave Branch River. And then from there, a car took us down to a lagoon, and there was a peninsula, and right at the end of the peninsula was a little resort. So we stayed there. And then once Deb and I wanted to go from this resort through the lagoon to where the lagoon opens into the ocean, and it was like a whole day's trip, so we took a picnic lunch with us, and then I made sure, Deborah, now you've got to have sunscreen on, and I spent hours putting sunscreen all over herself and put sunscreen on myself, and we got down there and we spent the day and we had a great time, and we came back, and when I got back my face was absolutely burnt to a frazzle. I've been so busy and keen on making sure that Deborah didn't get burnt that I forgot to put sunscreen on my face. And then I remember speaking to Valda when we arrived back home. I called her from Atlanta or whatever it was. Valda, I'm sorry, but I told her the story, but my face is burnt like crazy. This is it, so expect it. So she was not too happy about that. But Deb and I had a fantastic trip. And that was kind of the first experience with Belize. And then I went again with Max to Belize, and that's when we started getting property, and I can talk about that at another time. But then the trip with Jessica, one of our memorable trips with Jess, was the end of 1999, and I was still in Australia at that time, and it was just before the year 2000. And Jess was in Cape Town at university and said, Dad, why don't you come over and we'll have a trip together? So we organized to go, I flew to Cape Town, and then we organized a fantastic trip around Zimbabwe. Now, when I was 19 at medical school, I'd hitchhiked around Zimbabwe, which is another story. But so with Jessica, we kind of went with this group, and they went like the reverse way that I'd hitchhiked, with a lot of places that I'd been to. And Jess and I also had the most amazing time, most amazing experiences. It was a camping safari, and I remember one day we were canoeing on the Zambezi River, and of course there were hippos and crocodiles and everything all around. And two incidents occurred that are particularly vivid in my mind. On, I think, one of the first few days, we'd been kayaking, and then there were about 5 kayaks, and they formed a raft, each holding onto the kayak next door, and we had some tea. And as we were sitting there, about 100 yards ahead of us, there was a hippo, and we just looked at it, and then the hippo disappeared, and everybody kind of looked around, and the hippo surfaced about 15 feet in front of us, and everyone got a bit of a fright. And then the hippo disappeared, and I just knew that something was going to happen. We were all holding on to the other canoe, so it was like a raft, and the hippo then surfaced underneath us and actually lifted the canoes up a little bit. But because we were holding on, we weren't tipped over. Now, hippos, Jessica had said, "Dad, do you know the most dangerous animal in Africa?" I said, "Yeah, it's the hippo." And so we had that experience, and that hippo just went and disappeared. But again, we kind of remembered. And then another instance with hippos, which Jessica is very good at telling this story. We were camping at night, and when I'm out, most nights I sleep with earplugs because I just don't like to be disturbed, and I sleep better. So Jess tells a story that we were sleeping in the tent, and she heard something just outside the tent, and then she woke me up and said, Dad, what's that?" And apparently, according to Jessica's acting, I went like this and took out, What is it, Jessica? What's that noise outside, Dad? I said, "That's a hippo," and went back to sleep. And poor Jessica was like this. So that was the other. And then the third really scary experience was we were kayaking down the Zambezi, and there was like a little side channel. And we went into the side channel. Well, the guide went in first, and as he went in, he kept hitting his paddle on the side of the canoe. And that was to see if there were any hippos or crocs or anything in this channel, maybe just to let them know we're coming in and frighten them out. Well, in any case, we were the second kayak to come in. And as we came in, a hippo surfaced right next to the kayak. I mean, I could put my hand and have touched it, and opened its mouth like this, right next to us, and then luckily closed his mouth but didn't close it on us. Closed it right next to us. And he was right there, and then went underneath and went away. And we got to the bank. I started laughing, and Jessica said, "What are you laughing at? That wasn't funny." I said, "Jessica, I'm laughing because we're here to laugh." And then at the end of the trip, they arranged to have a T-shirt made of the most sort of prominent moment of the trip, and everyone agreed that this was the most prominent. And so here, everybody, there's a little picture. I've still got the T-shirt of Jessica and I, with me with my hair standing up on end like this, the hippo with his mouth open like this, and we had a fantastic trip. So those really were just some of the trips, and I did others. I went with Maxine, fortunately, on quite a few trips related to the company she started, to Bootstrap Project. We went on another amazing trip to Siberia. We went to Nepal and Tajikistan and Afghanistan. And so these single trips that I did with the girls really have got to be some of the absolute highlights of my life. In 1991, I think, I was invited. I'd been on the lecture circuit for quite a few years in America, talking about prostate ultrasound and prostate cancer, and outpatient surgery, and giving various talks on anatomy to urologists. And I was invited to talk about prostate ultrasound at the American Urological Association meeting, together with the guy Bill Cooner. And there's an Australian urologist came up to us and said that he'd very much like Bill Cooner and I to come to Australia to introduce prostate ultrasound into Australia. And so, wow, this was very exciting, and they gave us 2 first-class tickets to fly to Australia, which Valda and I then cashed in for 5 economy class tickets for the whole family, and we still had $200 left over from that, so it was a pretty good deal. So we went to Australia, I think it must have been 90 or 91, and then I gave my lectures in where did I give it? In Perth and Brisbane, I think, and then Bill Cooner gave his in Melbourne and Sydney. And then when after we'd given the lectures in Perth, I remember very well, we were going up to have the dinner at the speaker's dinner that night, and walking up the steps, and one of the Australian neurologists behind said, "Oh, Keith, you know, we're establishing a professorship of urology. It'll be the first chair of urology in Australia. Would you be interested in this?" And my eyes opened, and Valda turned around, and I said, "Yes, I would." And Valda said, "No, he wouldn't." And in any case, once they mentioned that, I really was very interested. I was not interested really in getting a chair of urology in the States. For some reason, I just didn't appeal to me. But this chair fascinated me because it was initially a privately funded chair, and it sounded very exciting. So to cut a long story short, I was invited back to be interviewed, and I was interviewed for the chair, and it was quite funny. I think they interviewed, I don't know, short 5, 6 people. But a friend of mine, also from the University of Minnesota, was invited, and we were both interviewed at the same time. And I went to the talks he gave, and he came to the talks that I gave during the interview process. And then we were taken out in this one guy's boat. It was like a double-story boat. His name, and John, was downstairs talking to the donors and to all the VIPs, and I was upstairs in the boat talking to them. And then we had to swap around, so I would come down the steps, and then John was waiting, and then he'd go up and he'd talk to the others. And then eventually they offered me the chair and didn't offer the others. So, and then the big question was, you know, what about Valda and the kids? So from then on, for the next 6 years, this was a very, very challenging time in our lives. We spent a long time. I'd get all information from them about coming, and I was very excited about it. And Valda had her career, and she just started her own laboratory, and I was being offered this fantastic position of the first professor of urology in Australia. And then we just couldn't decide, and they were starting to press us, you know, we've got to get an answer. Are you coming or are you not coming? And after about 10 months or so backwards and forwards, I remember I wrote 2 letters. And the one letter was accepting, and the other letter was refusing the position. And I got the family, and I sat down with them, and I said, "Okay, guys, which letter should we send?" And they said, "Well, let's accept, and we'll see how it works out." So, you know, I said, "Okay, once I mail it, that's it." So I mailed the accept letter, and then I went. And remember the very last day of our being at the cabin, our beautiful A-frame cabin, we were closing up the cabin, and somehow I had a little window, and the window dropped down on my finger and amputated the whole of the end of my finger. And I knew straight away I'd cut the nerve. It went down to bone, and Maxine was the one who had the most present of mind. She ran and got some toilet paper and wrapped it round, and then we drove into town, saw the surgeon. He said, "Come back later that night, he'll do the surgery." We drove back an hour and a half to the cabin. Somehow with this finger, we took the boat out of the water, drove back, went to the hospital, and they operated. And then about a week or so later, I flew alone from Minneapolis to Perth with my finger all bandaged up. And one of the big things about this is that the leader of the West Australian Parliament, the Speaker of the West Australian Parliament, had approached me before. He had prostate cancer, and they weren't doing radical surgery in Australia at that stage. And he asked me if I would do, what I thought. the doctors there, the urologist there, had told him in his true Australian Ocker fashion, he said, "Oh, I went to see them, and all they told me is they're going to cut my balls off." I said, "No, I don't think you need to cut your balls off. I think you need to have a radical prostatectomy." So he said, "Okay, he'll wait for me to come." So here I arrive with my finger amputated. You can imagine a urologist's finger, this finger being affected. And I had to say, "Look, I'm really sorry, but I can't do this now. It'll take a few months." He said, "Oh, I'll wait for you." And he invited me to Government House. He put on a welcoming party for me at Government House with all the VIPs and friends, and I met everybody. And here's my surgeon. Here I'm trying to shake hands with half a hand. And he did. He waited until I could operate. And his was the first major surgery that I did there. And luckily, it went very well. He's still alive to this day. He called me up about 2 months ago to ask a question about his grandchild. And interestingly, he comes to Tampa not infrequently. So as soon as he comes to Tampa, I'm going to see him and he's going to come and visit us. So that was very nice to know that 20 years later, he's still alive. So in any case, I took up the chair, and then we said, how it goes. Well, for me, it was going great. Here I was, the new professor, a new department, new house, new way of living, exciting. The kids each came down, and Valda made it difficult. She put it basically on the kids, that if the kids really liked it, then she would give up everything and come. And so I was pulling on the one hand, I couldn't see not liking it, but the kids were, Jessica was 16, I think, Deb was 14, and they came together, and their view was, well, they're just coming for the 6 months and then they'll go back. My view was that, oh, they're going to come, they're going to like it so much, they're going to want to stay, and then the others are going to come. But in any case, after 6 months, a difficult time for them, but nevertheless, retrospectively, I'm sure an educational and a good experience for them. They learned a lot, they saw other ways of living, they saw something that was non-American, which was more closer to Valda and our way of growing up. The schools they went to, they had to have little tartan outfits, and went to Presbyterian Ladies College. Two nice little Jewish girls, Presbyterian Ladies College. Then Jessica came back, Deb stayed a bit longer, and then I moved her from Presbyterian Ladies College to a Jewish school quite a long way away, and she liked that more. And then when they went, Maxine came. Now, of course, she'd been preconditioned by her sisters that she was only going to stay 6 months, but I was still having tug of war, really wanting her to like it. Max went to the Jewish school, so I would drive her all the way up, 45-minute drive, drop her off at the school, come back, so I was a single parent, the new professor with all the responsibilities of teaching and lecturing and operating. And then I arranged for somebody, Cassie, to collect Max from school and bring her home. And then at the end of that time, Max was very, very insightful young lady. She was about to come back home and to Minneapolis, and I was obviously not very happy. And then she wrote me a letter and said something along the lines of, "Dad, you've got to realize this may be your dream, coming to live and work in Australia, but it's not our dream. We feel ours is more in Minneapolis." And so she came back, and then I carried on for a little longer, and then realized that it became a choice between my family and my work, and I'd been there now 5 years. So I'd sort of done what I wanted to do. It had been a spectacular time. I was invited to lecture in Singapore and various places, and Valda and I would meet in various places. One time we were in Malaysia, and we went to Club Med in Malaysia, and Max and I flew up to meet her there. Another time we'd meet in South Africa, and then I was invited to Wales, and we went to Wales and we'd meet there. So it was interesting, but very, very, very challenging. And then after 5.5 years, Max was very upset about something. I remember talking to her on the phone. I said, "Max, are you upset because I'm not there?" She said, "Yes, Daddy." And I put the phone down. I said, "Okay, that's it." I called her back. Said, "Okay, I'm coming home, packing up everything." We had a lot of property there. We had a beautiful home that used to belong to the Lord Mayor of Perth. It looked out over the Swan River, but in any case, I packed everything up and came back to Minneapolis. So that was a very interesting but very challenging time. And so I think the kids benefited because, like Jessica, got early acceptance into Harvard, and I think part of it was the fact that she'd proven she could go into another different environment, do well there, and then come back. So that's very, in essence, the story of my trip to Australia. Well, as I mentioned, my first experience with Belize was this adventure trip that Deborah and I had. And then the opportunity, Max came and had some time and wanted to go somewhere. And I said, well, Max, I've been to Belize. How about somewhere else? No, let's go to Belize. So Max and I then went to Belize. And I remember very clearly we were in a small little village near the border of Guatemala. And we were in a bookshop, a second-hand bookshop, and this Belizean woman was telling us about the books she'd read, and then she started mentioning, a lot of tourists come here and they look at property. And so as soon as I heard about property, my ears pricked up because somehow it seems to be in my DNA, I don't know. But I then started looking at the realtor places in Belize, and there was some place that they said was for sale on a river, and so I arranged with this woman to take me to this place, and then we had dinner at a restaurant in San Ignacio, and the owner of the restaurant was a Rhodesian, and he said, oh, if you're going down to the golf course that's run by a South African guy, you should meet him. So, and this property that we wanted to look at was like half a mile down the road from the golf course. So we were on this bus tour, and the bus was going down back to Belmopan, and this piece of land was like over the river from Belmopan. So I said to Max, okay, Max, look, you don't want to come with me to see this land. You go and do whatever you're doing with the group, and I'll meet you at the garage just outside of Belmopan. And I said, if I'm not there because I'm still busy, then I'll meet you in Belmopan where you're going to take a bus down to the coast. And I said, if I'm not there, don't worry, I know where you're going to the harbour, and I'll meet you there. And if you're not there, I know you're going by boat to Key Corker, I'll meet you there. So I had all these things. In any case, I went with this realtor woman, and I saw this piece of land, and it looked pretty interesting. It was sort of going right down to the Roaring Creek River. And then I went up with her to meet the guy who owned the golf course. His name is Paul Martin, and he's like the Crocodile Dundee of the area. He's a real kind of independent guy, and he'd built this golf course out of the jungle. And he said, oh, don't rush with property, don't go and get this with this woman, let's see other things. And then this woman, and then the first thing I saw with Paul, he had a big skin cancer on his nose and next to his eye. And he walked up to me with this. I said, Paul, I'm sorry. I know I've just met you, and I know I shouldn't say this, but I'm a surgeon. You've got some bad stuff going on there. I know exactly the person who can fix it. My brother-in-law is probably the topmost skin surgeon in the country and anywhere, and he'll get that fixed to you. Now we've got that sorted out. Tell me about property in Belize. So he said, oh, well, don't rush. And then I left with this woman, and we drove off. And then as we were driving off, I saw this guy coming on the motorbike behind us. So Paul comes along, he says, oh, Keith, I should have told you, but the property next door to me is not really for sale, but I know that if the woman gets the right offer, she'll sell it. I said, oh, well, that's great, maybe I'll come back with Valda in a while and we'll see it. We're going to go on and try and meet Maxine at the garage. And he said, it's beautiful, there's a cave, and then out of this cave comes beautiful, clear, artesian water, and you can swim in this little pool, and then it runs into the Roaring Creek River. I said, Maxine can wait. Let's go and have a look at it. And so we went back and we walked on the property, and we saw this. We thought it was 39 acres, and part of it was developed with coconuts and fruit trees. It had been totally overgrown because this woman had done nothing for it for 10 years. There was this little house that was smoke blackened. there were people living in it. They just settled. What do they call them when you just settle in a house and occupy it? And there was kids running in and out. In any case, we went down to the cave, and here was just the most amazing sight ever. This beautiful cave going in with this absolute water as clear as anything. And again, there and then, I knew we were going to have to get this property. So we went back, and Max and I finished the trip, and we had a wonderful time. We went on this other little island, Kaye. We went canoeing down the whole of the Belize River, camping along the way, and we had a spectacular trip. And then when I got back to Valda, I said, "Come on, Valda, for our birthday present, let's go back to Belize. I want to show you this piece of land." So, cut a long story short, we bought that piece of land. It turned out to be 49 acres, not 39, so that was cool. And then Paul was next door, and he then cut down all the overgrowth, and we could see all the fruit trees that were there. And Paul then rebuilt this little house into a super little, like 600 square foot house with all glass, or actually Lexan, which is you can't break, all around. It overlooks Roaring Creek. You can see it from the house, and it's just a fantastic little house. Then two other things happened. I was interested at that stage because I was not doing surgery anymore. I was doing medical software, but I was still interested in giving back to society. And I thought a great thing would be is if I can volunteer at the hospital. And after various stops and starts, I managed to set up a very nice system. There's an excellent general surgeon at the Western Regional Hospital in Belmopan, name of Renee. That'll come to me. So I said to him I'd like to come down every couple of months and do some surgery. So I would go there, and initially Valda would come down as well, and she would see dermatology patients, and I'd see urology patients, and then I would see the patients, and I would operate, and then do some follow-up. And then Valda and I had been on a trip from Belmopan down to the coast. Belmopan is inland, and we went to this trip, and as we were driving near Placencia, which is a peninsula, I saw there was a sign saying new condo development, and of course we went and had a look at it, and there was this partly built condo. It had the ground floor was built, and on the top floor they'd built the walls, and there was a space for the window. There was no roof yet, and so there was a front room, 2-bedroom place. And I said to Valda, I sat down in where the window was going to be, and I said, "Valda, take a picture of me in our condo." And then we came back and we spoke to Paul, and Paul knew the guy that was selling it, and it worked out fantastically well because this guy needed to get some money to come in to carry on. So we pre-bought it at this very early age for a very good price, and then we waited for it to be finished. And then a funny story came from that. His name was Ian McField. Afterwards, when we had our place, said, "Oh, Ian, we'll tell our friends about this." He said, "No, don't tell your friends," because he wasn't going to sell to them at the price that we paid for it. So the place was called La Rubaya, and so we had that place, we had La Rubaya, and then I also heard about growing teak in Belize, and I got the idea, and then Paul also had the idea to grow some teak. So I said, well, wow, let's do this together. And then we bought some land that was just opposite Paul's golf course. So Paul's golf course was next to our land, and just over the road we got 90 acres of land to start a teak plantation. And I went to India for a big international meeting on teak, and Paul, who'd been to agricultural school in South Africa, had a whole list of questions. So I met all the people, I got the contacts, I asked the questions, I went to the meetings, and then I came back and I gave him all this information, and then he planted our teak plantation. So that's growing well now. So we've got the teak plantation, we've got the condo, we've got and then Paul's got a great sense of humour. So the teak was growing, well, he called the name of it, his name's Paul Martin, and I'm Keith Kaye. So of course the teak plantation is Kmart. and then the our place next to the river is called Woodhill Sanctuary, because that was absolutely my just dream. Eventually, later on, when Valda's mom was not so well, Valda couldn't come down so often, and I would go down 4 or 5 or even 6 times a year, and often I'd go on my own, and then I would do the work at the hospital. I'd come back every night to this beautiful place, and then sometimes I'd spend an extra couple of days there, and then this is where I would spend a lot of time, doing these various books. And in fact, I think in one of these books I've got a picture of me as the introduction, writing the book. Yeah, here we go. This was actually where I do a lot of the writing just outside, just in our house, looking over the river. So, and then I'd go down from there. I'd drive to the ocean, to Larrabea, to Placencia, and then I just have a few days of rest there, and I'd do more writing there, and sometimes I wouldn't come out of the room the whole day because I'd be so busy writing the various books, and would go for swims, and it was just fantastic. And eventually I stopped doing the surgery there, and we've still got the places. I bought another couple of pieces of land, and I bought in a resort, they're developing things, so we've got quite a lot of property there. An interesting epilogue story really is that Jessica, when she was with us one time, got the idea of writing and making a movie, which she called The Inheritance. I said, Jessica, just don't rush me too much, okay, about these properties. But she spent like a year or 18 months writing the story of The Inheritance, and then she's just finished like a month ago. She put together a whole full feature film called The Inheritance, and has now just finished filming there. She was there for 2 months. I went there about 2 or 3 months before, and it was really nice because I could introduce her to everybody. I could introduce her to the surgeon, to Rene, to some people who'd been my patients, and they all helped her to do various aspects of the filming, and she'd organized with the Belize Film Commission, and it's really a very professionally and independent movie. So I'm very excited for when this comes out, which will be later in the year. But that's kind of a nice little epilogue to this. And we've sold the one piece of land now, but we're certainly going to keep, we'll keep Kmart and Woodhill, and we'll keep Larrabea. So it's been a wonderful experience. We've got to know the people as not as tourists, but as friends and colleagues, and it's been just fantastic in Belize. So that's in essence the story of Belize. These are the two things that decided me now to stop working. One, they let Provation drop this whole division, all the surgery division, so there were 70 of us that were let go from the company, which devastated us, because I wanted to come here and be a snowbird, spend the winters in Florida, but yet work part-time, maybe 2 or 3 hours a day here at my desk. But this, my taking ill, then forced the situation, and Valda and Deb flew down, and basically Valda has taken leave of absence, so I'm now totally retired, and Valda may or not do something else. But I have to say that those 15 years working for Provation with some wonderful, wonderful people was just an amazing time. Every day was a pleasure going to work. I enjoyed it. We had fun. We worked hard. I traveled quite a bit for the company. I would help the salesmen, so I'd go all around to different sites and meet the urologists, many of who knew me from before. And I got paid very well, and it was good income, and it was just the most fun, exciting 15 years. So that's the story of my working at Provation. Okay, and then the other thing is how we came to be in this incredible place. When I came back from Australia, very good friends of ours, Alec and Irene Cass. Alec was a urologist from Australia, working in Minneapolis, or St. Paul really, and Irene was a family practitioner, and they were good friends of ours. We had 3 daughters and they had 4 daughters, and we'd get together and either Thanksgiving, or I think we had some seders together. And then when they retired, they came down to Sarasota, and they said, "Listen, Keith and Valda, why don't you come down and have a look around? You know, we've decided we can't rely on our children, so we've come down here, a nice place where the children would like to come, and we're setting up our own little support group, so come down." So Valda and I came down, and Valda will describe this better than I will, and we'll tell you the story, but basically we started looking at property, of course, saw a house, bought a house on the first weekend that we were here. It was on the mainland on the other side of the bridge. It had a canal on one side and a bay on the other. We didn't do anything with it. We rented it out for 3 or 4 years. We had a whole lot of aspects with changing laws, and we were going to build a house with Guy Peterson, and then with the changing laws, and the neighbour turned out to be a real, I won't use any bad words, but a real character, individual that I was very happy to move away from. And with much difficulty, thanks to the neighbour, I'd seen this piece of property, and we bought this piece of property, and then eventually we managed to sell the other place. And then again, we sat on this property for about 5 years. And I said, Valda and I kept on saying, well, one day we'll build our dream house, maybe in this life, maybe in the next life, one day we'll build it. And then one day, I was downstairs in my study, and Valda, Keith, come here quickly, come here. So I ran upstairs, and on the radio was a guy from a company that he called My Green Buildings, and he said that his speciality was building houses green, which is what I was very interested in, and then he said he was from Sarasota. So again, cut a long story short, I contacted this guy, started working with him and an architect, and it didn't work out. They turned out not to be experienced as they said, and they were kind of not quite what I expected. It cost me quite a bit of money, but that's okay. We got out of that thing, and then I was so fed up with the whole situation that I let it drop for another year. So this had been going on, and then about 3 or 4 years ago, we resurrected it. We got the original architect and worked with him, which was a challenge. We had different ways of working, but he was a superb designer and designed a beautiful house. And then we had the incredible good fortune to get the most amazing builder in history, Michael Walker, and his project manager, David Underhill, to build this house. Without them, this house couldn't be built. And they built this absolutely fantastic place, which, as my kids said, Dad, if we had all the money in the world, we wouldn't change a single thing about your house. And that's exactly the way that I feel, and we bless every day that we're here in these amazing surroundings. And Valda and I, I'm lucky that I'm not so lucky to get pancreatic cancer, but I'm certainly lucky that we're here together to enjoy the house. So it's the best of times and the worst of times, but we're enjoying every moment of this, and so grateful that we are here. So that's in a nutshell how we got here. This is a little story about Michael and getting Michael. I interviewed 4 different builders, and I kind of knew already from just speaking to Michael on the phone that he was going to be the guy that I wanted to build. And then Valda flew up just to meet Michael. I'd interviewed the others on my own. And when I first met Michael, we met just outside the Kaye restaurant there, right on the quay. And that's right, Kaye Fish House. So I'm always early, so I got there about 15 minutes early. And as I pulled into the lot, I saw this white big Ford truck come in behind me. I thought, that's got to be Michael. So I got there, I got there first, but we were both early. And then we got into his car, and we started talking, and he said he's got 2 daughters. So I said, Michael, I'll beat you by 1. I'll beat you by 1 daughter, and I'll beat you by 1 minute in getting here as well. And we were friends straight away. And then he showed us some of the spectacular homes that he's built. And then he said, why don't we go and stop and have lunch at the Kaye fish house? I said, no, Michael, I'm not here to have lunch. I'm here to, I want to see what you do, and I want to get some ideas. And then I said, the other thing, I said, Michael, you're going to have to work with the architect, because he and I have got different ways of working. I said, I'm not, you're going to have to deal with him. So he did that. And he said, Keith, I promise you, from now on, building this house is going to be fun. And he turned out to be absolutely true. It was fun. And one of the guys that I'd interviewed had built 4 houses with Michael. And he said, you know what, Keith? He said, I wouldn't recommend it, but I would build a house with Michael Walker without even having a contract. We had a contract, but this house, we had fun right the way through. So that's the story of our getting here. And now that we're here, we're very thrilled to be here. It's actually getting better and better. We're very happy with the new friends, including you and everyone we've met at the synagogue and other friends we've met here, and we're just amazed at everything that's available to us. I don't think that as far as a belief goes, I cannot say I'm a believer. You talk about God or Hashem. All I can say is that there's something that I don't know, and so I call it the great unknown. You can use the word God, you can use the word Hashem, you can use whatever it is, but I don't. If you really look at it, whether you're simple Keith Kaye, whether you're Einstein, whoever it is, the whole spectrum, there is no proof of what there is. And certainly not in my lifetime, and probably not in my children's or grandchildren's or great-grandchildren's, will we know exactly how things came about and what there is. So you can talk about the Big Bang and all of this, and that God controls it. So all I say is that that's something there's the great mystery. I cannot pray to the mystery to say, oh, please cure me of my cancer. I do thank the universe for being lucky Kaye, so maybe in that way I'm praying, but I can never pray and ask for something, oh please, let me have this, please get my health back, please, because that's just not the way I can think about it. But there's no ultimate answer, and that's all that I can say as far as things. But I recounted earlier how I didn't really know that I was even fully Jewish. When we got to Minneapolis, Valda's family was Orthodox, and we joined a conservative synagogue. We went very occasionally, went during the holidays. I've always been conscious of being Jewish. What I've always done since my bar mitzvah is I fasted the whole day of Yom Kippur. And quite often I'd go to synagogue, not the whole time, but I'd go to Kol Nidre, which I enjoyed going to. And sometimes on a Saturday I would go. And I've always been interested in history. I've been interested in the story of the Jews. I've been extremely proud of being Jewish, and I've wanted my children and grandchildren to be Jewish. When I started doing my genealogy, I realized more and went into it in more detail, and especially as I'm a Cohen, and in fact I'm the last of the Cohens, of the Kohanim of our whole family, and in doing my genealogy, we found my grandfather's grave just outside of Johannesburg, a place called Krugersdorp. Now my grandfather, his name was Josiah Kaplan, and he died in 1907, 5 days after my father was born. We found his grave, and my dad didn't even know didn't know anything about his dad. He just knew, when I asked him about his dad, he said, oh, well, he died when I was 5 days old, and he came from Russia. And he didn't know where in Russia. The Russia turned out to be Lithuania, which was the Russian Federation at that time. And the town was Panevėžys. And then he was, I say, buried in Krugersdorp. But on his grave, the gravestone does not have a Star of David on it, does not have a Morgan David on it. It has the Shin sign, Shin being the Shin sign for the female version of God. And the name was Josiah Kaplan HaKohen, the Cohen. And so I'm pretty proud of being a Cohen. My kids always tease me because I've had all my genetics done, and I do not have the Cohen gene. I have a different gene, and there are a whole group of Kohanim who have the gene that I've got, and we don't quite know the origin of that. There's all different things that they could possibly be. But one of which is that maybe we are the original Kohanim, and all the other ones with the Cohen genes aren't the original Kohanim. But so whoever's the sons and grand descendants of Moses' brother Aaron, I don't know. But so that's quite an interesting aspect of my life, and I'm pretty happy to be a Cohen. And my children are but Kohanim. In any case, coming back to being Jewish and Hebrew, I went on a route tour to Panevėžys, to Lithuania and Latvia, to places where my family came from, saw houses that my grandmother would have visited because her sister lived in Latvia. I went to the exact house. I saw the exact house from where my great-grandmother's, I should say, sister was taken and killed from the Holocaust. So I was exploring all that. But during this trip, I made a total idiot of myself. I totally embarrassed myself and made a total fool of myself. I was on this heritage tour to Lithuania and Latvia, and in our group there was a rabbi, Rabbi Sholem Lewis from Atlanta, and Rabbi Lewis is quite famous for two reasons. Firstly, quite a few years ago he gave a Rosh Hashanah sermon, and this was picked up even by the Iranian press because they kind of misconstrued what he said, but basically they said it was anti-Islam, and he was just issuing a warning. And this is available online. One can see this talk of Rabbi Lewis. And then secondly, Mitch Albom, the famous author, wrote a book about Rabbi Lewis's father, who was also a rabbi. So he was quite a famous guy. In any case, we went on Shabbat to the Choral Synagogue in Vilnius, the only active synagogue in Lithuania at the time. Beautiful synagogue. And when we got there, the group asked, are there any Kohanim? So I immediately put up my hand. Yeah, Kohen, I'm Kohen. And then obviously I did it without thinking, because they want, as a Kohen, they wanted me to have the first Aliyah, and then of course I couldn't read Hebrew, and I didn't know what it was, and I didn't know what I was doing, and I was totally embarrassed. And then Rabbi Lewis then kind of came to the rescue. I was a Kohen, he wasn't a Kohen, so obviously I got preference to him. In any case, I was so mortified and embarrassed by that when I came back, I studied Hebrew. I studied both some biblical and conversational Hebrew, and I took it pretty seriously. For 5 years I was working at it. I went to Israel on 2 occasions and did some studying there. And then my Hebrew teacher here in Minneapolis was terrific. And I could eventually hold a simple conversation with somebody. A good friend of ours, Marcus Kapani's mother, Hannah, lives in Jerusalem, and she speaks Russian and Lithuanian and Hebrew and Yiddish, but she doesn't speak much English. And so every time she comes to visit in Minneapolis, then I'd go out with her and we'd spend an afternoon talking only Hebrew. So I was pretty happy. So it had a good, happy ending.